Hey, get comfortable. Tonight's story is about a stranger's life, found on a night train, and how it brought someone back to his own. Leave a comment and tell me what city you're in. I'm genuinely curious where this story finds you. Alright, let's go. Daniel was sitting by the window, looking out at the dark. There was nothing out there worth looking at. Just night, scattered lights from small towns, the outlines of trees rushing past and disappearing. But he kept looking, because looking at the dark was easier than thinking about what he'd left behind. 3 hours ago, he'd pulled the apartment door shut behind him. Quietly, carefully, the way you do when there's a sleeping baby in the house. Though his son hadn't been a baby for a long time. 17, with his own room, his own headphones, his own life. The kind teenagers build slowly, piece by piece, until there's just no room left for parents inside it. Daniel closed the door quietly because he didn't want a scene. Didn't want Claire to appear in the hallway so they could start again. The same circle, the same words, the same accusations they'd both memorized long ago. He just left. He got on the subway, rode it to the station, bought a ticket for the next train out. Where exactly? Didn't really matter. Somewhere east. Fine. Car 7, seat 23, lower bunk. Good enough. He didn't have a work trip. He just needed to be in motion, because standing still had become unbearable. The train left at 11:40. The compartment was almost empty. Nobody on the upper bunks, and across from him, an older man in a knit vest was already asleep. Had been before the train even moved. Daniel was grateful for that. He didn't want conversation. Didn't want, where are you headed? And business or pleasure? He looked out the window. The city ended slowly. First the dense neighborhoods, then the suburbs, then the industrial zones with their grey buildings and yellow streetlights. And then, nothing. Real darkness. The kind you only get once you're far enough out. Just the occasional light and the sound of the wheels. He'd thought that sound would bother him, but it didn't. It was almost calming, rhythmic, like hearing someone else breathe in the dark when you can't sleep. Daniel didn't understand how they'd gotten here. Well, he did, if he was being honest. He understood. He just didn't want to admit it. Because admitting it meant admitting his part in it. And that was the hardest part to look at. 14 years. They'd been married 14 years. They met at someone's party. He couldn't even remember whose anymore. Danced to something slow, and she laughed at his attempts to stay on beat. 6 months later, they got married. 3 years after that, their son was born. Everything went the way it was supposed to, the way people say it should go. And then something started to quietly leave. There was no betrayal, no single catastrophe. Just somewhere along the way, he noticed they were living in the same apartment, eating at the same table, sleeping in the same bed, and were somehow very far from each other, like two lines running parallel, side by side, but never meeting. And tonight's conversation hadn't been the first one like this, just the first one where he stood up and walked out. Claire had said, "You're here," but you're not really here. And he hadn't found anything to say back. Because she was right. Because he knew it too. Because he couldn't explain where he'd gone or when it happened. Not to her. Not to himself. The train rocked gently. Outside, it was just night. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands, leaned back, and accidentally knocked something with his foot under the seat. Something solid, not plastic. He reached down. Under the seat, pushed into the corner, was a notebook. Not a regular one. It had a leather cover, dark brown, worn at the corners. The kind of notebook you don't pick up at a drugstore. The kind you keep. Someone had dropped it or forgotten it, or, Daniel thought this for no clear reason, left it there on purpose. He turned it over in his hands, nothing written on the outside. The leather was soft, well worn, but clearly old. Not antique, just lived in. He opened it. The pages were thick, slightly yellowed. The handwriting was deliberate, heavy pressure, letters large and a little angular, the way people write when they're used to writing by hand and never in a hurry. In the top corner of the first page, a date, March 1989. He almost closed it. This was someone else's, something private. But his eyes had already caught a line in the middle of the page, and he read it before he could stop himself. Today I couldn't find the words again. We're quiet, and the silence is louder than anything we could scream. Daniel went still. He read it again, then once more. He sat there holding the notebook while the train moved and the old man across from him breathed softly in his sleep and the night outside kept going. And all of it felt very far away. Because those 12 words, written more than 30 years ago by someone he'd never meet, had landed exactly where they needed to. He turned back to the beginning. My name is Victor. I'm not writing this for anyone to read. I'm writing because if I don't, I think I'll lose my mind. Helen and I are both 38. We've been together for 12 years. 12 years is a long time. It's almost a whole life. And I don't know where it went. Daniel let out a slow breath. 12 years. He and Claire had been together 14. A 2-year difference. More than 3 decades between them. And somehow, the same thing. He started reading. Victor wrote the way he thought, without literary decoration, without trying to seem smarter or better than he was. Just recorded things. Day by day, sometimes with gaps of a few days, sometimes several entries in a row written at clearly different hours. The morning ones more composed, the nighttime ones ragged, with crossed out words and sentences that started and didn't finish. Morning. She got up before me, made coffee. For me too. I heard her take out the second cup. We ate breakfast almost without talking. She asked if I'd be home for dinner. I said I didn't know. She nodded. That was the whole conversation for the day. Daniel read and recognized things. Not the details. Those were different. Different era. Different life. But something underneath the details was the same. That feeling of living next to someone and not knowing how to reach them. When the words you need to say get stuck somewhere between your chest and your mouth and just don't come out. When you go quiet, not because there's nothing to say, but because you're scared. Say the wrong thing and it gets worse. I figured something out today. something uncomfortable. I'm waiting for her to come to me first, waiting for her to say, "Let's talk," waiting for her to make the move. I'm just standing here waiting. I've been doing it for maybe 6 months, and she's probably doing the same thing. We're both waiting for the other one to go first, and neither of us is moving. I don't know if that's pride or cowardice. I haven't decided which word fits better. Daniel almost smiled. Not quite. Quietly, somewhere close to it. He knew that feeling, exactly that. Standing and waiting for her to take the first step. Getting quietly angry that she didn't, and not noticing that he wasn't moving either. He'd been living in that for probably 2 years, maybe more. Outside, a railroad crossing flashed by. Striped barrier, a single light, a car waiting in the dark. The train passed and the car disappeared behind them. He turned the page. April, Helen's mother's birthday. We went together, smiled, gave toasts. We're a normal family. On the way back, she leaned her shoulder against mine on the bus. Just like that, probably tired. I didn't pull away. We rode that way the whole time, shoulder to shoulder, without saying anything. And that was the best thing that had happened in months. Strange, right? That one bus ride was worth more than 100 conversations. Daniel stopped at that entry. He remembered something. He and Claire driving back from the lake house last summer. Their son asleep in the back seat, rain on the windows. Claire had dozed off with her head on his shoulder. He hadn't moved, afraid to wake her. Drove carefully, barely breathed, and thought, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Why doesn't it feel like this when we're both awake? Why does it take sleep or exhaustion to just be close without all the tension? He didn't know. He never answered that question. The train slowed slightly. A small station, dark platform, a few lights, nobody there. It paused for a minute and moved on. Daniel watched the platform disappear behind them. A single lamp on a pole, a bench, a metal trash can. Nobody waiting, nobody leaving, just a place the train passed through. He looked back down at the notebook. Late April, couldn't sleep last night, got up around 2, went to the kitchen, sat in the dark for a while, didn't turn the light on, didn't feel like it, just sat there. After a while, Helen came in. She didn't say anything either, just filled a glass of water, stood at the counter, drinking it slowly. Then she set the glass down and went back to bed. We were in the same room for maybe 5 minutes, didn't speak. And somehow, it wasn't awful. It was almost okay. Just 2 people in a kitchen in the middle of the night. Not fighting, not performing, just there. I don't know what to do with that, but I wrote it down. Daniel read that one twice. 2 people in a kitchen in the middle of the night. Not fighting, not performing, just there. He thought about the small hours in their apartment, the times he'd gotten up for water and seen the light under the bathroom door, known she was awake too, and gone back to bed without saying anything. He'd always told himself she wanted to be alone. Maybe she did. Or maybe she was waiting for the same thing Victor had described without knowing it. just someone to sit nearby without needing anything. He wasn't sure. He'd never asked. The train kept moving. May. We fought over nothing. I left a window open. She got a cold. She said I never think about anyone else. I said, "You always do this." She said, "Do what?" I couldn't explain. We went quiet. Went to bed on opposite edges, like two strangers. I lay there thinking, what are we actually fighting about? The window? No. The window is just the last drop in a cup that's been full for a long time. But what filled the cup? I don't know. Or I know, but I don't want to look. It was a long entry. Victor had clearly written it late at night, the handwriting slightly different, the letters bigger, like his hand was tired. I lay there thinking, what do I actually know about her right now? What does she love? What is she afraid of? What is she thinking when she looks out the window? I married her 12 years ago. I thought I knew her. But tonight I was lying there realizing I know her habits. I know how she takes her coffee and that she doesn't like spicy food and that she sleeps on her left side. But that's not her. That's just the outline of her. I've been living next to the outline of a person I may have stopped seeing a long time ago, or stopped looking at. Those are different things, not seeing and not looking. One is blindness. The other is a choice. Daniel set the notebook down on his lap. Outside, it was deep night. The old man across from him shifted in his sleep, murmured something, went still again. Not seeing and not looking. He sat with that for a while, sat while the train moved and the dark outside didn't change. When had he stopped looking? Not at Claire in general. He saw her every day. But when had he stopped actually looking at her? The way you look at someone who matters to you. When had she become part of the background, familiar as furniture, only noticed when something changed? You couldn't place a moment. That was probably the worst part. There was no single moment. Just 1,000 small choices, each one meaning almost nothing on its own. Coming home tired, not asking about her day. Her talking over dinner while he nodded and thought about something else. Her suggesting they go somewhere on the weekend. Him saying, maybe next time. Next time never came. 1,000 small not nows. And at some point, the distance between them grew too wide to cross by talking. He picked up the notebook again. June. Something shifted. I don't know how to explain it. We're still not really talking, but I've started noticing things. Just noticing. She still makes me coffee in the mornings, even when we're fighting, even after last night when we went to bed angry and didn't say a word. This morning, there was a cup of coffee on the counter. I asked her once, "Why do you still do that?" She looked at me like it was a strange question. She said, "Because you like coffee." That was it. Nothing else. Just because you like coffee. I thought about it all day. She could have stopped. She had every right to. We'd fought. She was hurt. Fine, I won't bother. But she didn't stop. Every morning. That small thing I hadn't noticed in years, it was always there. I keep thinking, how many other things like that did I miss? Daniel slowly turned the page. He thought about Claire. What had she kept doing that he hadn't noticed? What had she kept doing even while there was all that distance between them, all that silence, those two parallel lives in one apartment? He let himself remember. She always plugged in his phone when he forgot to charge it. He never said thank you, just picked it up and kept going. She bought exactly the kind of tea he liked, even though she drank coffee and didn't know anything about tea. When he was sick, and he was always dramatic about being sick, she didn't laugh, though she had every right to. She just brought medicine and something warm. Small things, so small he'd never counted them, just took them for granted. Like air, it's there, so you don't think about it. And she kept doing them, every day, even when she was hurting, even when he was impossible. He kept remembering. There was the time, maybe 3 years ago, when he'd had a terrible week at work. One of those weeks where everything goes sideways and you come home with nothing left. He hadn't told her much, just said it was rough. Go to sleep without me. He'd stayed up until 2 a.m. at the kitchen table, not really working, just staring at papers. At some point she'd appeared in the doorway, didn't say anything, just set a plate of toast next to him, buttered the way he liked it, and went back to bed. Toast at 2 a.m. He'd eaten it without thinking much about it at the time, just fuel, just something to do with his hands. He thought about it now, and something about that was hard to look at directly. And there was the way she always remembered. Small things, the name of a colleague he'd mentioned once in passing, the outcome of some meeting he'd complained about and then forgotten. She'd ask about it a week later, genuinely curious. He used to find it slightly strange that she held on to those things. Now, sitting in a train at 5 a.m. with someone else's diary in his hands, it seemed like the most obvious kind of love. Paying attention. That's all it was. Paying attention when he spoke. He wasn't sure he did the same for her. Something tightened in his chest. The train kept moving. July. I did something. Maybe it was stupid. We fought again. I don't even remember what about. Something about money or the summer, or that I don't listen. She went to the bedroom. I sat in the kitchen and was angry. Angry for a long time. You know how that goes, when you replay the conversation in your head and come up with all the perfect things you should have said. And then the anger just ran out, like air from a balloon. And what was left was tired, just tired. I got up and walked to the bedroom. She was sitting on the edge of the bed with her back to me, looking out the window. I sat down next to her, didn't say anything, just sat. Then I put my arms around her, from behind, the way I used to, a long time ago. She didn't pull away. We sat like that for maybe 10 minutes, quiet. Then she said, quietly, almost to herself, "I'm so tired of fighting." I said, "Me too." And that was it. We didn't say anything else that night. But something shifted. I can't explain it. Something just moved. Daniel read to the end of that entry and sat without turning the page. "I'm so tired of fighting. Me too." Claire hadn't said those exact words. She'd said other things, but the meaning was the same. Tonight, that's what she'd been saying. That she was tired. That she didn't know where he was, or why he was even there. that talking to him was like talking to a wall that occasionally nodded. And what had he said back? He'd said she was being dramatic, that he was right there, that he was present. What more did she want? That he worked, he provided, he did everything, and still it wasn't enough. He said things that were true and completely missed the point. Because she wasn't talking about work or money. She was saying exactly what Victor had written. You're here, but you're not really here. And he'd grabbed his jacket and left. Daniel closed his eyes. Outside, something had shifted. The darkness had gotten slightly lighter, just slightly, the way it does at midnight in winter, when the snow reflects something invisible. The train moved with a steady, even sound. He thought about Claire. Not about the fight, not about what they'd said. About her, who she was. The way she laughed, throwing her head back. The way she read, curled up with her legs tucked under her. The way she got angry. Not loudly, but inward, closing off. And that was somehow worse than shouting. The smell of her hair. He remembered that in his body, the way you remember something that matters deeply. 14 years. He loved her. That hadn't gone anywhere. It had just grown over, the way a path grows over if no one walks on it. Grass, brush, and you can't tell there was ever a path there. But there was. And maybe still is. He opened the notebook again. August. A month since that evening. We didn't suddenly become happy. It would be dishonest to write that. We still lose our tempers sometimes. There are still days when I come home and feel that wall between us. But something changed in how I think about it. Before, I thought, a hard time means it's ending. If it hurts, something's wrong. If things are bad, it must be falling apart. Now I think differently. Maybe a hard time isn't the end. Maybe it's just where you find out who you are and what you actually want. Because when things are easy, it's easy to be a good husband. Easy to love when love costs nothing. But when it's hard, that's when it shows. I don't want to leave. I want to learn how to stay. Those are different things. Daniel read those last 3 lines again. I don't want to leave. I want to learn how to stay. He sat looking at the words and felt something he couldn't name right away. Then he named it. Shame. Quiet, without drama. Just shame. He'd left. He'd gotten on a train and left because he didn't want a scene. Because it was hard. Because she'd told him the truth. And the truth is harder to sit with than the door handle. Victor could have left too. In 1989, in his apartment, with his Helen, he could have grabbed his coat and walked out. But he didn't. He sat in the kitchen until the anger ran out, and then he walked into the bedroom and just held her. No words, no explanations, no demands. Sometimes that's enough. Just that. Outside the window, something was changing. Daniel didn't notice it at first. Then he did. The horizon. The sky in the east was just slightly different from the land. Just barely. A thin strip of lighter dark where they met. Dawn hadn't come yet, but it was on its way. Daniel kept turning pages, slowly now, not rushing, already knowing the shape of what was coming, but reading every word anyway. Victor wrote about a weekend trip he and Helen took. First time in years they'd gone somewhere just the two of them, without family or friends. He wrote that the first day was awkward, two people who'd forgotten how to just be together. He wrote that in the evening they walked through a quiet town, found a small cafe, had tea, and she told him something about work, and he listened, really listened. For the first time in a long time, not drifting to his own thoughts, not waiting for her to finish so he could say his part, just listened. And she noticed. She stopped mid-sentence and looked at him. He asked, "What?" She said, "Nothing," and smiled. I'd forgotten what her smile looked like. No, I knew, but like you know a fact, and then I saw it, real, right in front of me. And I realized I'd missed her specifically, that smile, the person who'd gone somewhere, or who I'd stopped seeing, which is the same thing. Daniel set the notebook down. He looked out the window. The horizon was lightening, slowly, reluctantly. A winter dawn doesn't hurry, but it was coming. He thought about how much he missed Claire. Exactly that. Missed her. Not what she did or what she cooked. Her. The way she looked when she was annoyed. That slight squint. Lips pressed together. The way she murmured to herself when she was reading something interesting. The fact that she was the only person he could tell about this notebook, about this night, about Victor, and she would understand. She always understood things like this, better than he did. He hadn't told her anything real in a long time. That was a choice too, one he hadn't noticed making. He picked up the notebook again. There were still a few pages left. September. Small thing. We were cooking dinner together. First time in a while we'd done that. Usually one of us cooks and the other is somewhere else. I don't remember how it started. She was cutting something and I was at the stove, and we were just there, in the kitchen, not talking much. The radio was on, something low in the background. At some point she handed me a spoon to taste something, and I said it needed more salt. She said, "No, it doesn't." I said, "Yes, it does." She added salt anyway and then said, "Fine, you were right." Very quietly, like it cost her something. And I laughed. She laughed too. It was nothing. A spoon of soup and a small argument about salt. But I thought about it later, lying in bed. How long had it been since we laughed about something together? I couldn't remember. That seemed important. Daniel read that entry slowly. A spoon of soup, an argument about salt. And something in that, something that had been missing for a long time, coming back through the smallest possible door. He thought about the last time he and Claire had laughed together. Really laughed. Not politely, not at something on television. He couldn't place it either. Somewhere in the past year, maybe further. There had been a moment, he almost had it, at a dinner with friends. Something ridiculous had happened, and she'd looked at him across the table the way she used to. That look that meant, only we know why this is funny. He'd looked back, and for a second they were just themselves again. He hadn't thought about that moment until now. He turned the page. The last entries in the notebook were shorter. Victor wrote less frequently, maybe because things had gotten better and the need had faded. Maybe just less time, weeks between entries. October. Helen is pregnant. We weren't trying, or we were, a long time ago, and then somehow put it aside. She told me in the morning before I left for work. Just said it, quietly. I must have stood there with my mouth open for 10 seconds. Then I walked over and held her. For a long time. She was crying. I didn't ask why, whether it was happiness or fear. Probably both. I didn't know what I was feeling either. Happy, yes, and something else. Something that felt like an answer. And the last entry, written in a different hand, calmer, without the heavy pressure. December. A daughter. Her name is Anna. 7 pounds. She's lying there looking at the ceiling with this serious expression, like she's already making decisions. Helen is sleeping. I'm sitting here writing this because I want to remember how this night looks, the smell of it, the light from the hallway. And I want to write something down for myself so I don't forget it later when things get hard again. Because they will. I know that now. So here it is. Hard doesn't mean over. Hard means it matters. Only the things that matter are ever really hard. The entries ended there. Daniel closed the notebook. Outside, it was actually getting light. The sky moving from black to dark blue to blue. And on the horizon, a thin strip of pink. The world was waking up. Fields covered in frost, lone trees, scattered houses with dark windows. Soon lights would come on inside them. The train was slowing. Daniel looked at the notebook in his lap. Victor, whoever he was, that man from 1989, had been through this. Not gracefully, not easily, not in a straight line. He dug in, gotten angry, waited for her to go first, wasted time in that waiting. And then one night, the anger just ran out, and he got up and walked in and held her, not asking for anything, and something moved. Not right away, not permanently. It'll be hard again. He'd written that himself. But it moved. Outside, the first lights of a city appeared. Daniel took out his phone. The screen lit up. 7:15. 5 missed calls. 2 from Claire, 1 from their son, 2 from her mother. He looked at those calls and thought, she called. And their son had called on his own, which almost never happened. She hadn't slept. She called. He opened messages. The last one from her, sent at 4 in the morning. Where are you? Just tell me you're okay. He looked at that message for a long time. Then he started typing. Slowly, because he wanted to get it right. Not, I'm fine, don't worry. That would be nothing. Not, I'm sorry. One word doesn't cover it. He wrote, I'm on a train. I went east. I'll get the morning train back. I find someone's journal in the compartment. been reading it all night. A man from the 80s writing about how he and his wife almost lost each other and how they didn't. I want to tell you about him. I want to tell you a lot of things. I'm coming home. He sent it, watched the screen. A minute later, 3 dots. She was typing. Then, I'm awake. I'll be here. He breathed out 2 words. I'll be here. She could have written so much, and she had every right to. But she wrote that. Just, I'll be here. The train was pulling into the city. Platforms, lights, buildings sliding past outside. The old man across from him stirred, opened his eyes, looked out the window, began gathering his things. Daniel looked at the notebook. He thought about taking it with him, showing Claire. That felt right. She should read it. But then he thought differently. He set the notebook back on the seat, face up, where it would be easy to see, where the next person who sat down would notice it right away. Maybe someone else needed it. The train stopped. Daniel put on his jacket, picked up his bag, stepped into the corridor, then out onto the platform, into the cold morning air, into the pink light of early dawn, into a city just starting to wake up. He took out his phone and looked for a ticket back. First train in 2 hours. Good. He put the phone away, turned up his collar, and started walking along the platform towards the station building, toward the warmth, toward the coffee and the waiting. The station was half empty at this hour. A few people with bags moving slowly. A cleaner pushing a wide mop across the floor in long, unhurried strokes. Somewhere overhead, a departures board clicked and shuffled, numbers rearranging themselves for the morning's first trains. Daniel found a cafe near the far end of the hall. Fluorescent light, plastic chairs, a glass case with pastries that had been there since yesterday. He ordered a coffee, black, large, and sat down at a table by the window that looked out onto the tracks. The cup was warm in both hands. He sat there for a while, not really thinking about anything specific, just sitting, watching the platforms outside slowly brighten as the sky came up. A luggage cart rolled past, pushed by a man in an orange vest who moved like someone who had done this 10,000 times and had stopped noticing it. Daniel thought about Victor sitting in his kitchen in the dark, not turning the light on, just sitting. Sometimes that's what you do. You sit somewhere and wait for the thing inside you to settle. You can't hurry it. You can't think your way through it. You just sit with a cup of something warm and let the night finish becoming morning. You took a sip of coffee. It wasn't good coffee. Bitter, slightly burnt. He drank it anyway. His phone buzzed once. Claire again. Just a single question mark. He typed back. Still at the station. 2 hours. Then I'm on the train. 3 dots. Then, okay. Just okay. He stared at that word for a moment. In another life, in the life they'd been living for the past 2 years, that okay would have felt like a wall. Cold, clipped, the door closing. But she'd been awake all night. She'd called 5 times. She'd said, I'll be here. The okay wasn't a wall. It was just someone who was tired. who had run out of words for now, who was waiting, the same as him. Both of them waiting, just in different places, for the same morning to arrive. He set the phone face down on the table and looked out at the tracks. A train was pulling in on the far platform, long, slow, hissing to a stop. Doors opened. A handful of people stepped out into the early light, pulling their coats around them, squinting. Each one going somewhere, each one carrying something you couldn't see. He wondered about the notebook, who had left it, whether it was an accident or not. He kept coming back to that, the way it had been pushed into the corner, just far enough to be missed if you weren't looking. Victor had kept it for years, through all of that, the fighting and the silence and the slow finding of each other again. And then somehow, it had ended up under a train seat in the middle of the night. Maybe it was just lost. Things get lost. Or maybe some things find their way to where they need to go. He finished the coffee, sat a little longer. The hall was getting busier now. More voices, more movement. The day beginning to fill in around him. Someone sat down at the next table with a newspaper. A child ran past, laughing at something, pulling a rolling suitcase behind them, like a small, unwilling animal.
Daniel watched all of it, quietly, from the inside of his own silence. At some point, he took out his phone and opened a new message to Claire. Didn't send anything, just wrote a few words and then deleted them. Wrote something else, deleted that too. Finally, he just wrote, "I have a lot to tell you." She replied almost instantly, like she'd been holding the phone. "I know, me too." He breathed out slowly. "Me too." He was thinking about what he'd say to Claire. Not the words exactly. The words would come when he knew what he wanted to say. He was thinking about wanting to sit across from her and just look at her. Listen, not interrupt, not defend himself, not wait for her to finish so he could say his part. Just be there, really there. Hard doesn't mean over. Hard means it matters. The dawn was spreading across the sky, pink turning to orange, then to something close to gold. Frost on the platform glittered. Somewhere past the station building, a new day was beginning. Daniel walked and thought, okay, this is where we start. Right here. That's the story. If something in it stayed with you, leave a like. It's a small thing, but I notice it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, there are more nights like this one ahead. More stories like this. Good night.